all for being here. Can you hear me clearly? Yeah? Cool. Thank you for being here at the end of what I can remember is probably the hottest day of the year so far. I know this is the coolest stage, but I'm hoping you're here to listen to me. Well, all of the last few days, I've got to be honest, my imposter syndrome has been at its peak. Just being out here at the greatest, the biggest marketeer festival in the UK, with my background, I'm just so excited to be here and so honored to be here. I trained and worked as a lawyer briefly, and then left it all behind to follow an obsession for food. I became a chef and restaurateur, and somehow, somewhere down the line, I became obsessed and fell in love with brands and with consumer personality, consumer psychology. Now, unlike many of you here today in this room, I've got no formal background in marketing or advertisement, no education in it. So everything I'm going to talk to you about, I've learned from the kitchen pass, from the dining room, and from leading a restaurant group from the front line. It's not going to be theory, it's purely anecdotal. It's real, and it's very, very personal. These are the stories and lessons that I'm going to share with you that guide me, guide my team, and are at the core of our values at Hoppers. I'm not going to bore you with the rest of my background or my backstory. We can always chat about that while having a snack at a Hoppers stand. There's one across the road. We're in the food court. It's closed right now, but please do come there tomorrow. That's my Hoppers plug done. But in a nutshell, 15 years ago, I left a career at a Magic Circle law firm in the city of London. I then went off to India and traveled extensively across India and Sri Lanka and followed my obsession for food. I immersed myself in food and in culture. I then came back, and after a few stints elsewhere, I joined my wife and her brothers 10 years ago exactly to open a tiny 40-seat Sri Lankan and South Indian restaurant in Soho. It's called Hoppers. Today, 3 restaurants in, hundreds of thousands of Hoppers and dosas later, here I stand before you at this marketing festival. It's unbelievable. I still can't believe it. So, let me take you for a second to Instagram. Bear with me. This is not a blatant self-promotion. This is not my way of getting you to follow me on Instagram. I just want you to focus on this graphic here. This recipe, lemon rice, almost out of nowhere, seemingly completely weirdly, this recipe blew up. And it got millions of views on the first day, and it kept ticking till about 9.5 million views. Now, it's not like we weren't putting a lot of effort into restaurant and my personal content. I'd do it at the risk of annoying my family, at the risk of, being engaged in something else. I'd spent a lot of time on social media. But suddenly, this recipe, after all the others, just blew up, right? Since starting that recipe series 2 years ago on my personal account, Karan Cooks, my videos have racked up about 75 million views collectively. I've got 660,000 followers. These numbers are dizzying. It's a bit crazy, but they only say one thing to me. Today's consumer doesn't just want to eat, drink, use or wear your brand. What they want to do, they want to live it, they want to feel it, and they want to be one with it. Today, a great brand is one that goes beyond its product. It becomes a friend. It resonates with the inner set of values. And above all, it forgives the brand, the customer forgives the brand when the brand screws up. That, for me, is real loyalty. And that's what I want to talk about today. So here are 5 lessons I learned in my 10 years of building Hoppers through trial and a lot of errors. So lesson 1. Restaurants are about people and culture. The food is secondary. Now, before any of you restaurateurs walk out of the room, bear with me. Hear me out. Food matters. Of course it does. But it's a given. It's your ticket to entry almost. What sets a great restaurant apart? What makes people come back, queue in the rain, and tell their friends about you? That is how you make them feel. It's the feeling you give them. The welcome, the warmth, the experience. And all this comes from the people and the culture. So my first takeaway, food should be a non-negotiable baseline. You can't start a restaurant without good food. It gets people in through the door. But culture and people, that's what's going to keep the lights on well after that initial hype fades away. Lesson number 2. Brands about how they make you feel. Now, we've all heard this. I'm going to give it to you in a restaurant context. We often hear that brands solve problems. But the best brands out there, they stir emotion. As a kid in 1990s India, Nike wasn't just a shoe for me. The swoosh, the air bubble under your heel, and that little pump on the tongue. Does anyone remember that? Any 90s kids, that little pump? That just made you feel like you could jump higher, run faster, maybe even fly. It wasn't the performance specs. God, there must have been many other better shoes out there. It was a belief. It was aspiration. And it was the feeling that Nike gave you, or gave me. Restaurants are no different. Now, one of our earliest regulars at Hopper's Soho, this old man, he'd come in every week. He'd sit at the same table, order the same thing, week on week. He'd read his newspaper, he'd have a bite of his mutton roll, and he'd sip a ginger beer. He barely spoke a word to anyone. It was only after about a year when I went up to him and spoke to him. He said, "These rattan chairs you have," so we've got these rattan chairs. So these are the same chairs that my grandma used to have in her house in Colombo, the house I spent many summers in the 60s. So there it was. He wasn't here for the mutton rolls or the ginger beer. He was here for those chairs. He was here for a feeling, that quiet comfort of nostalgia. That's what we had helped him reconnect with. That's when it hit me. The most powerful restaurant experiences don't just feed you, they transport you. Whether it's to a place in the past or a place in the future. If you haven't been to Sri Lanka, it's that imagining that you're there. Or simply that feeling of warmth and belonging. And that's what we try to provide a lot of our guests at Hoppers now. So my takeaway from this, move people emotionally, and you will outlast brands that just solve problems. Lesson 3, consistency over novelty. Now, my wife and I, we have a tradition. Whenever we travel, if there's a McDonald's at the airport, we have to eat there. She's smiling, it's true. We go there, we eat there. I know a lot of chefs who'll cringe about this in public, but secretly they eat there too. I openly admit it. Now, why do we do this? Because when you're jet lagged, when you're tired, and after living out of a suitcase for days on end, there is a comfort, there's a familiarity in consistency, in predictability. And there was a time at Hoppers when we first opened where we used to change the menu every few months. We felt if we weren't changing the menu, if we weren't doing something new, if we weren't pulling dishes off, doing specials on, we weren't with it. We weren't doing enough, and we had lost it. And then suddenly we found a spate of guests coming in really upset because they suddenly said, we've lost our favorite dish on the menu. We love that dish you tried. Where's it gone? We're like, we had to make space in the menu to give you something else. They're like, no, but we didn't want that. And that's when we realized that actually guests who come into a restaurant, they weren't coming in for a surprise. They were coming in for comfort. Think about concerts. You don't want to go in and hear your favorite band playing their whole new album. You want to hear the hits. You want to hear the classics. You want to sing along. And that's exactly what people come to restaurants for. So my takeaway is consistency builds trust, and trust builds loyalty. Just out there. Lesson 4. Set expectations at every stage or risk breaking them. Now, London diners, we're all London diners. We eat out a lot. You could be with your kids at Pizza Express on a Sunday. You could be having a sandwich on a Monday. and you could be at the Ritz on a Thursday evening. But every diner knows how to read cues. Now, these could be subtle cues, psychological cues, or blatant cues. Every signal you send, the music, the lighting, the quality of the paper your menu is printed on, or the way you serve your wine, each one of those little steps sets in motion a chain of expectations. At Hoppers, we're casual, fast-paced, fun, and no frills. But one time, we had this new manager. He came in and he wanted to go above and beyond. He was super enthusiastic. And he decided he wants to start taking coats at the entrance. So when a guest came in, he offered to take their coat. I don't know where he put them, but we don't have a cloakroom. But he took coats. Now, you'd say amazing, right? Great hospitality, amazing. He's doing something above and beyond. But what did that do? Suddenly, these diners started thinking and expecting fine dining hospitality, which is very different from what we provide. And now we start getting this spate of complaints. And people start complaining about how they want topped up wine every time they had 2 sips. Or they were asked to leave before 3 hours at a table for 2. Can't afford to do that at Hoppers. What had happened? The experience of Hoppers hadn't changed, but the expectation had. And that's what drives most negative reviews, in my opinion. Not bad experiences, but mismatched expectations. So the takeaway, every part of your brand, tone, service, design, it must align. You've got to give it thought. Or the guests are going to go off and write their own story, have their own expectation, and somehow or the other, they're going to fall short of it. My 5th lesson, the final one. The bigger your brand, the smaller your influencer. And this is something I've learned because of my own engagement in this social media space. In 2015, we were flying. We had just opened, we had glowing reviews, we had awards, we were on the best opening lists, every party I was invited to. The queues, the guests loved us, we had queues down the street, and we couldn't keep up with the demand. Then came our second restaurant, 2.5 years later, and the noise died down. It did really well, but we were no longer that shiny new thing, and I took it personally. I worried we'd peak too soon. I lost sleep. I got very insecure. I took it out on my family. I took it out on my team. But then, one Tuesday evening in 2022, I stood at our King's Cross bar. Now, mind you, this is our biggest restaurant so far. It's 3 times the size of our first Soho restaurant, about 120, 130 seats, and loads of people on the bar. I looked around me. It was 5:45 in the evening, and the restaurant was buzzing. There were date nights, there were office drinkers, there were solo diners, there were family reunions, there were smiles everywhere. It was unbelievable. And that's when it hit me. I realized we don't need those headlines anymore. The real power lies in these people in front of us, in the room right now, the everyday guest. That moment changed how I and we think about our marketing at Hoppers. We stopped chasing critics, we stopped chasing the sort of big name influencers, and started focusing on our community, the real storytellers. That mother who shares a dosa selfie, the couple who's decided to celebrate their anniversary with us at Hoppers, the PA who has us on speed dial, the friend who's dragged along 6 people to try our bone marrow curry, and that solo diner who was treating themselves to Hoppers. These were our storytellers. They weren't chasing likes, they were sharing their life. Their circle may be smaller, but their influence was real. These are the micro influencers who mattered to us, not the ones with the millions of followers in another country, but the ones who could get you bums on seats on a rainy Tuesday night in London. And that was what we learned. So my final lesson here, don't build your brand on borrowed reach. Build it on loyalty, love, and the small but mighty voices who bring others along. So with that, just a few final thoughts. I truly believe that despite everything happening in the world, the future of branding isn't about who shouts the loudest. It's about who makes that deepest connection. In a world that's obsessed with impressions and reach, it's often the smallest, most genuine interactions that leave the longest lasting marks. So build your brand like a great dish, with care, with balance, and above all, make it personal. Thank you very much, and I look forward to having many of you at Hoppers over the coming weeks. Thank you. Thank you.